children in Worship and Wonder are learning about how the church tells time today. And by time, we mean what the church calendar looks like. In the church calendar, this is the last Sunday of the year. Next week will be New Year's. We'll celebrate. And so learning about that there's special times like Advent, which is starting next week, and there's Lent and Easter and Pentecost. And then there's this time that if I was standing high above you and there were drapes and coverings all over that were ornate, they would be green today. Next week they would be purple. Or if we were a very progressive high church, we would have blue. Nice progressive middle-aged churches do that. So there's these different colors that we use for the different times of the year to celebrate it. And this is the last Sunday of the green, which is kind of normal time or the post-Pentecost period. And so normally in a church that does a lot of this, they're following the lectionary, and so there would be a gospel that they were getting their lessons from through this period of time after Pentecost until now. And this year, if we were following the lectionary, it would be the Gospel of Luke, but we're not following the lectionary, and we've spent a lot of time in Matthew. And so I decided to take from some of the last teaching of Jesus in Matthew before we get to the Last Supper and on into the crucifixion, death, and resurrection. So I went to Matthew 25. Matthew 25 is a part of the judgment stories or the judgment parables that are in Matthew 24 and 25. And the last one is one that is probably set me on the path to being here today. When I was in a fundamentalist church, I read that to teach it and realized that parable said that gather all the nations. It wasn't he would gather all the believers or he would gather all the nations together, and then he would separate the sheep and the goats. And it wasn't by what they believed, it was by what they did. And that caused me to see God bigger than I had seen God up to that point, and started me on a path that led me to where I am today. So that one's important to me, so I've taught it a whole bunch. So it didn't seem like a challenge, so I went to the one right before it, because it's a challenge, it's a hard one. This parable of the talents is hard. There's a few things that you should know going into it. One, the very word talent in the English language comes from this parable. The Greek word for talent that is there is like talentio, something close to that, and it has become, you got it down? Huh? Talanton. He went and looked it up. Talanton, and they chose to use that word, and so talent became what we use to talk about the gifts God's given us so that we can go about doing the work of God. So that this story has had that impact for all of us. Another thing to know is that when they're telling stories that have an eschatological bend, why do I even try to say a five? When they're telling stories about the end of the world, they use very extreme language. Why did I try? So they use extreme language. So the courses, the choices are going to go to the extremes. And so it has this judgment at the end of the parable. And I think it's important going in for you to understand how I see judgment. And you can agree or disagree with it. I can give you my reasoning in depth later if you want to talk about it. I see it like this. There was one time when I was a young high schooler. My sister was home from college. She had a couple of friends over. I'd known her friends all my life. two blonde girls, Chris and Tanya, and they're over. And my sister was dating a young man from McAllen, and he was of Mexican descent. And I had good friends, Josue and Enrique Villa, and we would sometimes joke around and use that wonderful word, wetback, when we were joking around with each other. And so in my privilege, I felt like I had the right to use it there in my home. And so I was making like my sister's boyfriend, who I really loved and respected, was a wetback. And I said it multiple times. And my sister tried to stop me, and I didn't stop. And my father tried to stop me, and I didn't stop. And we went on. Everything was pleasant. The girls left, and my father looked at me and said, "What's Tanya's last name?" Her last name was Ortiz. And in that moment, I was judged. My father didn't have to punish me in any way. In that moment, I knew that somebody who had shown me nothing but kindness and love, I had shown massive disrespect to her and her family out of my privilege. I felt like it was fine to do at the time, and I wasn't trying to harm her, but I had harmed her. And so when I went to apologize to her, I had to look into the face of someone who loved me and know that I was wrong. And that judgment is hard. That judgment that first night when I realized what I had done, I went to my room and I was so mad at myself that I was grinding my teeth, gnashing of teeth, and I wept for what I had done. And I felt the full judgment of it. Nobody had to cast me anywhere. That's judgment. To look into the face of love and recognize that you have harmed the relationship rather than help it is all you need to feel judged. It'll come from within. So we have this story of the talents, and I don't think that we understand it the way that we read it. So I'm going to give you the completely unordained, unexpected, and not to be taken as completely accurate Derek Tompkins' parable of the talents. Once there was a man, and he owned a company, and he called in 3 of his workers who made $8.25 an hour. And he went to the first one, and he told her, "I am going to give you $2 million of the company's money because I'm leaving the country. I want you to take care of that money in the company." And then he went to the second one, and he told him, "I'm going to give you $800,000 for you to take care of for the company." He went to the third and said, "I'm going to give you $400,000 to take care of for the company." And then he left the country. If you make $8.25 an hour, you make just over $17,000 a year. And suddenly, these 3 people who were going to make $17,000 that year were in charge of $2,800,000 and $400,000. And the first one, she said to herself, "He's seen me work. He must believe in what I can do." And she went about trying different ventures with that $2 million and turned it into $4 million. And the second one said, "He's recognized all the gifts that I have." And so he went out and started investing that $800,000 and turned it into $1.6 million. And the third one said, "You two are nuts. We make $17,000 a year. We go into debt more each year with what we get paid. If this $400,000 goes away, I will be paying it back for the rest of my life." And he bought a safe, and he put the money in the safe, and he lived in fear that a thief would come and take that money, and it affected everything he did. It affected where he went, how he acted, all that he did. And the boss came back from out of the country and called the three into his office. And the woman went in and said, "I took your $2 million and I did these new ventures. It's $4 million now." And he said, "Way to go, girl. I'm going to put you in charge of all the ventures we do. You will be part of the leadership team of this company." And the guy who had received $800,000 said, "I invested with your $800,000 and I turned it into $1.6 million. And he said, "Way to go, man. Way to go. I'm going to put you in charge of helping us grow our money as a company, and you'll be part of the leadership team of this company." And the third one said, "I know who you are, and I know that we make you more money every year by far than what you pay us, that we go further into debt while you get rich from our work. And I did not want to go even further in debt to you. And so here is your $400,000. And he said, "You could have at least taken it to the bank and put it in a CD. I'd have gotten 1.5% at least. Maybe a little money." I'm sorry. If that's how you view things, you can't be part of this company. I'm going to have to let you go. So he went out and left the company. And then he realized that that meant that he had to go home and tell his family that he didn't have a job. And that meant that he was not going to get the opportunities that the other two who risked got. And he wept. And he was angry with himself for the decision he had made, and he ground his teeth. He was gnashing teeth and so frustrated. And there, in all its beauty, the story ends. So what do we do with this? That's the interesting thing about parables. They make us try to come to conclusions about it. Are we supposed to be on the side of the guy who lost his job? I mean, Jesus has never told a story that paints it quite like this. There's been masters before, but the masters have been kind. But this guy's talking about how mean this master is. Is he mean? Is this a story about the economy and how there are people who are just going to keep growing, and then there's others that are just going to get ground under by that economy? Maybe. Some people think so. I don't. Today. Next week I might. Beauty of parables. Let's change our mind. We could see it like the other two are going to see the master, that this is a generous master. He's taken these slaves and given them this huge chance to grow in what they have and what they do. He's seen abilities within them and given them a chance to grow those abilities. So is he a good master and the other one just didn't understand? Amy Jill Levine has a book called Short Stories of Jesus where she talks about the parables, and she says that they have three purposes. They're to get us to know how we should live, to know what matters, and to know what to live in community is. So as I tried to look at what that would mean with this parable, what it means to us, how do we live, what matters, what is community? And I thought of it kind of like this. Jesus went to Mary and said, Mary, you have been given so much love. And I want you to go out and I want you to keep sharing that love. Share it with people who are at death's door. Give hope to people who are full of dread and despair. And Mary went out and loved people. And that love grew. And more love came out of that love. And Jesus went to Peter and said, Peter, you are bold. You are bold enough to proclaim things the rest of the disciples wouldn't. You are bold enough to get out of the boat and try to walk on those waves. You are bold, and I want you to go and be bold. And I want you to tell people the good news everywhere you can. And I want you to help them see how big the community of God can be. How much bigger than they think it is, it actually is. And Peter went out and boldly proclaimed and grew the community and welcomed all into the community of God. And Jesus went to Judas and said, Judas, you've got the money. I want you to go out and feed the hungry, clothe the poor. And Judas said, if I do that, there won't be any money. So he took the money and he left. And after he left, he realized what he had left. He realized the community that he had let go of. He realized the love that he had lost. He realized that money had won over things that were more important. And he wept. And he gnashed his teeth. Let us pray.